How did Dr. Neville survive the infection of I Am Legend? It was the year 2012 when what began as a miracle sent by the gods turned into a nightmare. The cure for cancer developed by Dr. Krippin had mutated into a terrible virus, which brought humanity to its knees. But in the heart of the Big Apple, there was one man trying to stop the epidemic, Dr. Neville, the same man we will see back in the second part of I Am Legend. In this video, we'll be talking about the strategies this man used to survive an apocalypse. What were those qualities that helped him to survive? And what we might see him doing in the second I Am Legend movie. And if you like everything related to this universe, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because we will be delving into the books soon. Welcome to the Oasis Geek. To understand how Dr. Neville was one of the people who survived, we must start at the time before the infection. Dr. Neville was a soldier scientist and army virologist who worked studying epidemics and biological weapons. He was on the front line of scientists fighting the infection. Neville's experience with the virus meant he was better prepared than most when the apocalypse struck. His knowledge was invaluable about the Krippin strain, its symptoms, and its effects on the human body. As a virologist, Neville also had access to better facilities and equipment than the average citizen to try to synthesize antidotes and vaccines. The same facilities later began to fall because of the infection. Neville's military training also strengthened his chances. He learned critical survival skills such as orienteering, weapons handling, first aid, and staying calm under pressure. His physical and mental condition as a soldier gave him the stamina to persevere on his own for years. As humanity fell to its knees, Neville watched from his home. When New York was quarantined, Neville's preparedness allowed him to adapt better than others to the post-apocalyptic conditions. He strategically fortified his home and established military routines that gave him structure and purpose on a daily basis. He never gave up hope of reaching other people alive, because if he had survived, perhaps others had too. His radio transmissions followed military protocols to communicate with any other possible survivors. Neville lost his own family during the initial outbreak in 2009. He watched helplessly as a helicopter carrying his wife Zoe and daughter Marley was shot down during the chaos of the hasty evacuation of Manhattan. This personal trauma gave Neville emotional motivation to continue searching for a cure years later. In his lab, Neville often played newsreel footage from 2009, featuring interviews with Dr. Krippin, looking for clues to the origin of the virus and possible cures. He meticulously preserved this old footage because it contained potentially useful information from the early days of the outbreak. It was also in his lab that Neville confirmed his immunity by testing samples of his own blood. He discovered that his antibodies could neutralize the lethal strain in cell cultures, which explained how he had survived the massive exposure to the virus in New York. Neville covered all the windows with welded steel plates, installed electrified barbed wire around the house, and buried landmines in the surrounding area for protection. Inside the house, he stored large quantities of canned food, weapons, and ammunition, so he could safely resist if the infected attacked him. But he couldn't take care of his mind when he was almost caught by the Darkseekers. This is where we see how Neville is already on the verge of breaking, because he has lost everything to the infection and is about to give up. The only reason Neville could sleep relatively calmly was his life structure and security system. Although mentally, he could no longer continue. During the day, Neville dedicated himself to studying the Darkseekers in depth, kidnapping them, and subjecting them to experiments with the intention of repairing the damage his colleague had caused. But these creatures began to become more intelligent, and while Neville was doing his experiments, the Darkseekers began to create a society of their own, or at least that's what happened in the books. This society was not shown in the first movie. Neville's survival lasted until he found other people and allowed his life system to break down. At least that's how it was at the end of the first movie, since in the alternate version Neville survives and is now heading towards the place where other surviving humans are supposed to be. All this time, Neville survived alone, and by adding more people to his environment, he is also taking many risks. For in a post-apocalyptic world, the real danger is other humans. Now in the end, Neville lost his life, but in the alternate version he is still alive. And this brings us to the second I Am Legend movie. It was announced that Michael B. Jordan will be part of the cast of the I Am Legend sequel, and it is very likely that he will play a character who becomes the successor of Dr. Neville, being also a soldier in the search for a cure to the virus. I think Michael B. Jordan's character could initially be presented as a villain or an antagonist, but over the course of the plot, he would end up becoming the person who manages to unite the surviving humans and the Darkseekers. And this is where the greatest irony of the situation lies. I do not believe that the end of this second movie will be the destruction of the Darkseekers, nor of humanity. Rather, I believe that the Darkseekers are beginning to develop intelligence and may end up being the ones who give coexistence with humans a chance. As we explained in a previous video, at first the Darkseekers only sought to satisfy their instincts, but then they gradually regained their humanity. Perhaps the future proposed in the universe of I Am Legend is one where both humans and Darkseekers manage to coexist, reaching a kind of understanding or agreement that allows them to share the world. To continue surviving, Neville needs more than an alarm system. He needs to understand and respect these new species in the world. According to one of the screenwriters of I Am Legend 2, Akiva Goldman, this second film will be more faithful to the original than the first installment, and will even be inspired by The Last of Us video game. If the story follows the books, this means that the idea of the Darkseekers having their own society is very likely. But tell me, what do you think about this? What would you do in Dr. Neville's position to survive a zombie apocalypse? And for more videos of your favorite series and movies, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. You are on The Oasis Geek.